Well, Dallas, we're so glad to have you on the podcast. How you doing today?
I am doing great, Keith. Glad to be here on the show. I'm excited.
You say that now. We haven't got into one of my favorite topics yet, so we'll see if you still say that after we cover that somewhere in the podcast.
Oh no. Oh no.
I love to ask my guests this question. So, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Wow, I've gotten a lot of good advice over the years. I think that, if you're in a career, one of the things that I was told by a friend of mine early on in the career is that, and he was talking about it as he was going through a large corporation. We've had two completely different career paths. He went into this multi-billion-dollar corporation and came up through. But what I've seen as an entrepreneur is it's been kind of the same way, just in a different flavor. And he said, "Hey, look, if you're going into this job and you're going into the role," he's like 5 years in front of me. He said, "You need to make sure that you are adding value for about 3.5 to 5 years." He said, "But you need to be moving and growing out of that position every 3.5 to 5 years, or you're just going to be stuck. You're going to end up being the guy or the girl in that spot. So you need to be doing." And I thought that was I never really thought about that. But then after I got into working and things like that in entrepreneurship as well, the different companies I've been in, it's very interesting how, whether you're in a large corporation or whether you're in a small startup business and you're going through different ventures, or whether you're going through other small businesses, you tend to need to grow. And what he was really telling me is that you should always be doing a couple things. Number one, you should be seeing how you add value where you are, kind of like the saying, grow where you're planted, and being
Hmm.
thankful and grateful every day that you can do the work that you're called to do with excellence. But at the same time, if you do that, you should be able to grow out of that. And that's going to require two things: you learning new skills about what's over you, and you bringing somebody else up and helping them get to be able to take your place. And so there's a lot of things going on in that little statement, but I thought that from a career perspective early on, that was really good advice. I think another piece of advice that people have given me is just being able to be in the present, and being able to stay focused on the present moment as much as possible, because Lord knows we're very distracted. We live in a distracted culture, and knowing those priorities and those core values early on, setting goals was a big thing. I was in 10th grade, and I don't even know who it was at the time, but the speaker was like, if you write your goal down, you're like 90% more likely to achieve it. And I can't tell you what the rest of his talk was, but I zoned in on that thing. And that was a game changer for me. I've got every goal that I've ever written since 11th grade in a little folder, and that was a big deal. So if you write it down, it really does. I have I think a much higher percentage of goal attainment, because I took his word for it. I was like, all right, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I'm doing it. So I write my goals down every year. I'm a goal setter. So yeah, those are two things that I feel like were very good pieces of advice that I was given.
I remember somebody else saying too, whatever you put out into the universe as a goal that you're going to do, you have to achieve it because you stuck it out there in the universe. So it's kind of the same thing. If you write it down or if you speak it out there, you really are committed to do it. So I like that
I'll tell
idea
you
of
this. This is a
if you
great
say it,
story
you have
with
to do
that.
that.
Yeah, you got to be
Yeah.
consistent. You're going to want to be consistent. But here's the other thing. I actually, this is what's kind of come to mind. I saw my senior year psychology teacher. I was a high school senior, and I had to take this psychology class. And at the time, I was like, what are we doing? Why am I going to take this class? And the lady was the most awesome teacher. She had just great energy. She was like really little, just a little lady, just so short and tiny, but her energy filled up the whole room. And so she inspired all the class. Well, one of our last assignments, and I'm 18 years old, she said, I want you to get out a piece of paper. And I don't know if it was a final exam or whatever, but she said, I want you to write exactly what your life is going to be like. Where you're going to live, who you're going to be with, what kind of job you're going to have, how many kids you're going to have. Write a picture of your life 15 years from now. And so I was like, all right, whatever. So 18, what do I know? I write down this page, turn it in. She gives it back to us at the end of the year. She's like, you take this with you. I'm going through, we moved back from Atlanta. We had lived in Atlanta, moved back to South Carolina. And it was exactly 15 years later. I was 33. And in moving boxes and throwing stuff away, I found that piece of paper. And wouldn't you know, down to the number of kids, where I lived, the house, everything It was unbelievable. And I saw her about 3 months ago, and I was like, Miss Marsha, I've just got to tell you this. Now, I'm much older than 33 now, so it's been way more than 15 years. But I said, I
Right.
got to tell you, I got to tell you this story. And so I found her and was able to tell her that her little her 1 page assignment ended up being spot on accurate to what ended up happening. So I think that goes to your point, the power of putting it out there. When you put it out there, you never know.
There you go. I love that. You've achieved a level of success in your life, and I'm kind of curious because no one ever gets where they are by themselves.
Hmm.
Somebody once said the self-made man is not much of a man. But
That's right.
so, who are some role models in your life that came alongside you in your journey that
Mm,
you can tell us what made them special for
mm,
you in that journey?
mm. That's a great question. And man, it would be a long list for me, but just some off the top of my head. Number one, my father was an entrepreneur as well. He was a teacher, so he taught chemistry, and he also started a company with his two brothers. And so he's now retired from chemistry, but the company has done very well. And so I got to see this company come out of the dirt uh, in the early '80s. And as a kid, I'm like, 4 or 5 years old when they started the company, and so I'm playing on pallets and riding on the forklift beside him and watching him pull ridiculous hours and work unbelievable shifts. I mean, he'd get home from school at 3 and go out to change his clothes and go out and load trucks by hand because they didn't have a forklift at the time. Load a tractor trailer truck till midnight or 1 in the morning. Get home and do it all again the next day. Be at school at 7:30 in the morning. So I watched his work ethic. um, I think that his work ethic is something that he definitely transferred on and has been very, very helpful in my career. I also think that I had a person I was actually talking about this the other day. I had a man named Rusty Will at Clemson University. I was at Clemson. I was broke. I mean, I was taking all kind of crazy odd jobs. I mean, you broke when you go and your job is to sit in a parking lot of a barbershop and run people out of the parking lot because they're starting to park there and sit and walk across to the restaurant next door. The barber hired me to sit in the parking lot and just run people out so they didn't get towed. That's how broke I was. I was happy to have it. I'd sit there and study and make $10 or whatever it was, and I was like, okay, I get free haircuts. So it was like, all right, this works. So, but I was in college, didn't have any money. I was working all kind of odd jobs. I had a very challenging degree, and so it was just a lot of time management. But I had a guy that would always take me out to lunch. His name was Rusty Will, and I would feel bad for it because like he took me out, he never asked me to pay for it. He would always catch the bill. And so finally one day I was like, I am not eating lunch unless you let me pay for this. I don't care if I'm broke or not. I got enough to buy this lunch. I'm buying your lunch. And he's like, you are not buying my lunch. And he said, but you can do me a favor. I said, whatever it is. He goes, one day you're going to get out of here. You're going to graduate and you're going to have the ability to take other people lunch. And you could pay me back by taking other people to lunch and just listening to them and hearing their story and helping them out. And I was like, that's a deal. And so I just appreciate his willingness to be present with me in a, you know, period of time that was hard and listen to what was going on and encourage me and be that kind of that mentor. And so I take a lot of people to lunch. And so, yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
So if we ever get together, you can take me to lunch.
I'll be happy to.
There you go.
Be happy to.
Just don't take me to a cowboy
No.
restaurant. Anyway, but
I love it. I can see us coming. I can see us coming soon. Oh man. Hmm.
I'm curious about your journey. Tell
Mhm.
us about, first of all, kind of your personal story, and then kind of give us a segue into how that connected with your career path.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm an I would say I would classify myself as an entrepreneur. But I would not say that. I mean, we have such stigma around that concept. I feel like you have to be the Silicon Valley tech startup guy to be an entrepreneur, and I just have a much looser definition of that term. I see it as a creator, a creator of things that have value and to the broader population, and searching for how to combine things like that. So to me, it's a pretty broad term. And so for my career, like I started out working, I got out of college and I've been in, I don't know, something like 12 or 13 different industries. It's been incredible. It's been a great ride,
Wow.
but yeah, I don't recommend it. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, so it's like I have squirrel moments every other minute. Like it's like squirrel, oh, look at that bright and shiny object. So that's been kind of also kind of translated into my career path. But it's been a cool ride. I got into water technology early on and was able to that's kind of technical training, water chemistry and things like that. I just really enjoyed doing that and learning that. We have some patents in that and different things. But I got to a place where I wanted to move more into the business side of things instead of the technical side. And so I ended up going into a venture funded startup and leading that. It was the most expensive window shades you can buy in the world. So I figure how that has to do with water, like what, and then really was kind of transitioned out of that. And in between time, I was in the construction industry, I was in the corporate training industry. All these things are kind of happening, all that go as we go through that. But these are the kind of highlights. But I think for me, um, it was being able to go into a situation and problem solve and innovate. And these are the types of like bring order to chaos. And that's really kind of where entrepreneurship and me, like where I'm kind of like snuggling up to entrepreneurship like peanut butter and jelly is just that order from chaos is where I would say. So my journey has been very interesting. I was talking to someone recently and about, they were talking about entrepreneurs having grit and different things like that. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize is that if you're getting into that creative space, it's messy and you have to have some grit that you got to push through. You got to be able to hang tight with something. People hear, oh, you got a patent in water treatment, water chemistry, whatever. I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. I spent 7 years with no guarantee that thing was going to happen. I mean, I spent 3 years and it didn't work at all. I found it's like that light bulb. That Tom says, like, I found 990 different ways to not do a light bulb. Well, I mean, I found I don't know if it's 900, but it was a lot of ways not to do what I was doing. Like it just has to be. And so you just have to kind of feel like you're going to persist and have that grit to get to the finish line. So that's been my career path. I always wanted to lead, and I always wanted to create, and entrepreneurship seemed like a great path for that. But I had no ability. My career has not been one of those. Some people are like, I'm going to go do this. In fact, that friend that I was talking to you earlier about, he entered that company and just went through the ranks, and that was it. For me, if you'd have told me 20 years ago that this is where we would be, in my career, I would have been like, you're crazy. I have no idea. It's just so mine has not been a planned path as much as it's just been an opportunist. I've seen opportunities and met those opportunities. So yeah, that's been my journey.
I love that. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about entrepreneurs is that it's easy to become an overnight success. You've just
Oh
described
gosh, yeah.
that to be an entrepreneur means you're willing to grind and you have such confidence in what you're working on that you will stick to it when other people might quit before they reach that point. So for those young entrepreneurs who are thinking, no, I'm looking for that one magic pill, that one
hmm
magic bullet that's gonna overnight jet me to success and fame and fortune, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs?
My advice is, I guess first I'd start out with an apology. I am so sorry that you have been fed a lot of social media stuff that makes you think that whatever it is that they make look easy is actually easy. So, I'll apologize for those people because they're trying to sell you something, some course or whatever. And I'll go ahead and apologize for them and let you know that, I'm not saying that lightning doesn't strike and that people don't walk into success in that, but those are very hard to replicate. And what I've seen is that most entrepreneurs, it is a journey, and it's not one that you just make it to the top of the mountain overnight. And it's something that even if you hit something that's really successful, it can still be extremely difficult because anything you grow and scale is going to take a lot of effort. So whether or not you're just grinding it out to try to get it off the ground and you're turning that, as Jim Collins would say, that flywheel of momentum, if you're just slowly turning it, getting it going, it feels like it's never going to go. That's one kind of grind. Or if you are standing where lightning strikes, and that thing does take off, whatever you're working on, then it's a different kind of grind, because then you're figuring out personalities and people and growth and scale and strategies, because you can implode as fast as you explode. And so I think that for me, it's 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 being okay with where you are and knowing where you want to go. And it's not about how fast you get there, but it's that you're moving forward and moving towards that end. So for a young entrepreneur, I would say be really careful, because if somebody's selling hype and they're selling all this kind of this thing that looks really easy, I would say just keep I'm not saying don't go after and don't keep growing and don't learn and don't buy the courses and don't get better. Absolutely, because you might learn two or three things there that could help you in your journey. But I would say set your expectations that the journey is going to be challenging, and that the obstacle is the way. So you should be looking for the obstacles and expect them to come. You know.
Good. I love that because I think so often because we think entrepreneurs are all overnight successes that they didn't earn what they got. And so I'm glad to hear. I love having entrepreneurs on my show because everyone I've talked to has the same message. It was not an overnight success. I worked really, really hard. And to get where I am took a lot of time, a lot of risk, and a lot of effort. And I just want to break the myth that it's easy for people who have done it. And we kind of dismiss the actual amount of work and effort that went in to get to the point that where
Well,
people are.
I was listening to a great speech. We had a speaker at one of our conferences, and it was a Navy SEAL. And he stands up. Now, this wasn't Jocko, so I hate to burst everybody's bubble. It's not
Okay.
Jocko, but it was a Navy SEAL who knows Jocko. And so he was talking, and he said he has his own company. They did some consulting, and he said, "Look, when people apply to my company, they give me a resume, and I give it back to them, and I say, no, I want you to fill out this." And he calls it a reverse resume. And I thought that was just a fantastic idea, because he makes them go back through their resume and say, this is what you want everybody to see. This is like, you know, the pageant. This is the show. He's like, but what was it backstage?
Right.
I need to know what I want to know, where all the failures happened in that resume, all the setbacks, all the things. And they literally, to get a job in this organization, have to come back and retool their whole resume to show all the things that they don't want to show and don't want to say, just because it makes them. He just wants to know the real deal. He wants to know the struggle, not just the success. And I'll tell you, for example, a few years ago, I got into a venture. We'd started a dental company, and a partner and I'm not a dentist, obviously, and so um, my partner was, thankfully, and so we're in this organization. We just had all this ambition, and we thought we were hitting it just right, and we bought the first two offices, and then COVID happened. Well,
My word.
nobody tells you what to do when you've never been owning a dentist office, and then COVID happens, and you're answering questions that you've never asked before, having to answer stuff, and then you find out you're down like several $100,000, and you've taken loans out on your home or property. I mean, like, that's real. That's real life, and that's real entrepreneurship. And thankfully, we weathered that storm and righted the ship and made it through. But nobody puts that on Fortune magazine or in INC magazine or anything like that. They're putting, oh, well, I'm 30 under 30 and all this stuff that in Forbes that you don't see. But real life is a lot more messy. And I think I have respect for people that have the grit, whether they're at the beginning and they're just getting started and trying to figure things out, whether they're in the crucible right in the middle of all the pressure and they're under, or whether they've made it to the other side and they've created something that's a sustaining success. So I've got respect for all three of those positions, but I would say if you're on the front end, expect there to be challenges for sure.
Yeah,
and do it anyway.
Let's talk and do it anyway. Go for it. You got to go for it.
That's right.
Just like when your team throws 5 interceptions, you still got to hope they're going to win. But that's a side note.
Maybe you do, or maybe you just throw your hands up like, again? Are you kidding me? This always happens. Oh.
But I digress. So you focus on coaching and leadership. Those are two of my
Mm.
passions. I love leadership development. So what led you to get focused on leadership
That's a great
development?
question. So that was actually in the startup. That was the most expensive window shades. That's the first time I was put into a situation where I was in the hot seat, in control of, and they wrote us, literally they wrote a $5 million check, and they said, we want you to turn this into, this whatever X. It was venture fund, venture capitalist that did that. I had never been in that position before, and so I found myself, I loved business strategy. I just loved, getting a position over your competitors and how we're going to grow and scale, and I just loved that. But I quickly realized that for me, I could have the best strategy in the world, but if I couldn't bring people in that could align around that vision, align around that strategy, and then get that work done successfully, then really was going to be dead in the water, or I would never achieve the kind of success that we were, it was possible to achieve. And so I think for me, I had hired at the time a lot of millennials who at that time, that was years ago, that time were just getting into the workforce, and they were asking questions like, should I buy a house or a car? I mean, or finance or lease, or what am I doing? In addition to like, how do I do my job well, right? And so I found myself meeting with these young, it was a bunch of 20 somethings. We were all having a great time and just learning and growing together. I found myself having a lot of conversations on how to approach problem solving and how to delegate and how to lead and how to communicate and all these things. And so that's really what started the journey. I started keeping notebooks and notebook of different ideas and conversations and thoughts that I was having with them. All the leadership stuff, I'm a leadership junkie, was chewing up and kind of regurgitating in a way that made sense. And so that was really the first. It was by necessity for me. I moved from business strategy into leadership pretty quickly, instead of, because I think at that point in time you find out when you're put in that position, and we see this a lot of times in organizations, a lot of people are reluctant leaders because they've come up and they've been a technical expert. Maybe you're an engineer or maybe you're a plumber, and all of a sudden you get put in and your boss says, oh, you've done such a good job there, now you're over four people, and you're like, okay. And then you naturally want to just do the same thing that you've been doing and treat those people like you've been treating this engineering drawing, and it just doesn't work that way. And so we see people struggle a lot with that. So when you're put into that situation, you say, okay, I've either got to change or this ain't gonna work. And so that's kind of what happened to me. I was like, I've got to really focus on leadership and developing people as a strength if I'm going to be successful.
It reminds me of my first real ministry, my first church. I walked in and they say, we called you to lead us. I'm like, well, I just got out of school. We don't have classes on
Oh,
leadership. And so I had to go find the best leader developer out there. So I started digging into everything John
mm,
Maxwell
mm,
wrote. And every time he was in town or anywhere near me, I go to a John
mm.
Maxwell seminar. I just sat there and just learned. And then I took what I learned and I brought it back to my church and I trained my leaders
There
how
you
to lead.
go.
And so we'd start every meeting out with a 20-minute John Maxwell 21
That's
irrefutable
good.
laws. And we just plowed
That's
through,
good.
and I just love leadership because if you pour into people and raise the level of people around you with their skills, then you're not going to be the expert. I don't want to be the smartest person in the
Yeah.
room. If I am, then the room's probably not as smart as it
Well,
could be.
as
But
you've said, and you've been in the ministry, so you know the law of the harvest. If you're talking John Maxwell, so I mean, you were doing it. You're living that. We plant seeds in people. We plant ideas in people, and we expect that return. We expect that. We expect the harvest. And I think that a lot of people expect the harvest without the seeds, or plant the seeds and don't expect the
right,
harvest. And I think those are two mindsets that are really sometimes hard for leaders. Some are rose colored glasses and they just think that, oh, they're going to they're going to just be great employees or great team members, and they haven't actually done the investment piece. And then when it doesn't work out, they're like, what, why didn't you do this good? It's like, well, you didn't really give them a good start. You didn't invest in them. And then other people, I think, maybe that the glass is half empty. It's people that just would invest, but then the expectation of the return is not there. It's like, well, you can't. If you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself, and that's the problem too. So I think those are two fallacies in misconceptions in leadership. But I think that what you described is living the law of the harvest, which is we're going to plant some seeds and expect to harvest.
yeah, great. So you have a new book, Lyft, and it aims to help leaders increase performance by strengthening their team or
Hmm.
organizational culture. So tell us a little bit about why you wrote the
Mm.
book, Lyft.
Well,
What
that's another good
inspired that?
story. So I was in an air balancing company. Now I didn't even know what air balancing was. I had no idea. I was like, is the air balanced? It kind
I
of
still
feels
don't
right.
know.
Yeah,
So
it feels good in here. You cool? Are is the temperature right? Okay. No, but this company is a fascinating company, it was a great story. They go into like hospitals. So if you think about if you're sick in a hospital and you open the door to a person that has a virus, if any of that air gets out in the hallway, now everybody in the hallway is a virus. So that room has to have a negative pressure. So when you open the door, air rushes into that room. Well, who knew that every room, every main room in the hospital, operating rooms, recovery rooms, treatment rooms, have to have what they call our critical pressure rooms, and they have to get certified by someone to say the airflow in the hospital hallways and the rooms are correct. And so it's like an air engineer. That's the best way I could use to describe it. So they literally are these air engineers that go around and measure airflows everywhere that make sure they're correct. So, everything from hospitals to, Boeing painting shops or pharmaceutical companies or whatever, anything where airflow is really important, these guys go in and do their job. So smart dudes and men and women, and pretty cool company. So I was in that company. The interesting thing was it was owned by a female, and the company was 92% male. And so when I got there, it was just a lot of people just grinding on each other. They were great people. They would just grind on each other. And so we were like, hey, we need to shift the culture, and we need to do some things, little things. It's good people. So it's like, why can't we get along here? This is great. So it was on that journey, and that journey also, I had the opportunity to start meeting with some of the leaders and see some real tremendous development. And it was a guy that I became good friends with. Actually, just talked to him this week, and he uh, he was a project manager, and within 4 years, he was leading, two regions in the company, essentially two-thirds of the company, and he had just excelled tremendously over that time. And a lot of where Lyft came from was conversations between, between him and myself. Like Kyle and me would just sit down on a Monday morning and we just start talking. And it was it was really cool because I could see his growth personally as a father, as a leader in his team, managing his team professionally as well. So he came in one day and he said, I said, hey man, look, I need you to move to the next level. I need to get you out from project manager to ops manager. He was like, I'm more of a performer. I like performing. I don't know about this coaching stuff. And then to see 4 years later, it's the mindset that he has now is complete. I mean, it's just a 180. And so watching his journey of him just completely crush it has been encouraging. And so when I left uh, that organization, when I was starting another company, I wanted to capture those concepts of how we went into that culture that had been established for 30 years. It was a 30-year-old company, and how we could, what levers did we turn, and what did we do to shift that culture from more of a transactional culture to a transformational culture. So yeah, that's what inspired me. My journey in that and his journey through that was the inspiration of the book.
now you're speaking my language. I just did my doctoral dissertation on
Mm,
organizational change, and I'm trying to help congregations kind of implement Cotter as a model, as a way to help the
mm,
church transform its culture. And part of my study took into account that leaders have a big impact on change, and I tried to test which leadership style performed
mm.
well and which one didn't. Authoritative leaders did not manage change well
Go
in this
figure.
church system. Yeah, transformational leaders
Sure.
did better at it, and then you had charismatic leader, which I actually would call narcissistic leaders, did
Yeah.
really well for some of it. As someone who studied this, how do leaders change their culture? Because really, that culture changes. How do you shift an organization that may not want to do the tough things of organizational structure, changing the processes, building
Yeah.
momentum, all that kind of stuff that's involved in change? How do you help
Oh,
leaders change their culture?
that's a huge question, man. We could camp out here for like 2 or 3 days, man. We could start us a course on this, but I will give you a short as bite-sized answer as I can. I think that culture is dynamic, so I think you have to approach it that way, and that's one of the reasons I think you said in your research that you saw that transformative and charismatic work, at least in some parts with charismatic, because culture is dynamic. So the charismatic can walk in and their energy is going to be a force that's going to move something. The reason I would tend to lean more on transformational is because it even speaks to this a little bit in the book Good to Great, and from a business side, is that it can culture can be completely based on the leader. So if it's a charismatic leader, their force alone will push the culture and move the culture. However, when you pull the leader out of that system, it can tend to fall apart. And so with a transformational, I think the approach there is I'm building the framework underneath the leader that's strong. So it doesn't matter. It's kind of like you hear a football coach say next up. We lost our number one receiver. Oh, well, we got one. I think Saban said we got one we're going to put right in. You're never going to know the difference, right? It's just the next up. And so that's, to me, that's the
Right.
idea of transformational, is that we're working on everybody in the team. And so I think from a cultural standpoint, there's some things that there's some things and pieces that we have to do to fundamentally get in place. Number one, alignment is key. The more I can get people to align around an idea and row the boat in the same direction at the same time, the better off I am. But to do that, most people miss the basics. It's like in basketball, it's like you gotta know how to dribble and do a layup. If you can't dribble and do a layup, but we're missing the fundamentals, we're not gonna do well. The fundamental is I've got to be able to describe the identity of the organization or the team with great clarity over and over and over and over again, so that people in the organization know exactly what they're supposed to align around. And most people will say, okay, we've got a vision statement, we've got a mission statement, we're good. And I say, that's like saying when Ford trucks, because they're the number one selling truck in the country, when Ford says to a 16-year-old, you need to buy a Ford truck. And then they never say that to them again the rest of their life. And they expect to be the number one selling truck in the world. That's not how it works. Nobody, no. Every time from a 16 to 65, every time you turn on TV, every ball game, every sport, it's got Ford trucks. You got to buy a Ford truck. This is what you're going to look like driving a Ford truck. This is where you can go on your Ford truck. It's over and over again. And so I think that the number one, identifying your identity and communicating it with great, great consistency is something that you have to do. I think a lot of companies do a good job at marketing externally. They do a less than stellar job at marketing internally. And so I think that's one of the two things, because ultimately that's going to give you something to align around, and then having those core values and making sure that you're living those core values. And you talk about defining those core values. If we can define those things, we can measure against that alignment. So we can say, okay, unpack that a little bit and say we've identified who we are and our identity and why we do what we do. Like Simon Sinek's begin with why. We've got that clear. Okay, what does that look like on the daily? Like if you say integrity, I think integrity means one thing, you think integrity means something else. And the people at Enron, they thought it meant something else, because the day that their whole thing went and imploded, their core value was integrity. So obviously we got some differences of opinion. So integrity in this company, in team, in this organization, it looks like this. This is the legs. We're putting legs to this core value. So I always like action things. So what is that when someone goes out, like professionalism was this air balancing companies, professionalism was one of their core values. Well, how do we know what that looks like? Well, it means that you tuck your shirt in and you think, well, that's kind of weird. But these guys were going on construction sites, but they were also meeting architects and engineering offices. So they wanted to be professional, but they were around guys on a construction site that didn't tuck the shirt in because they didn't have to, because they were on a construction site. But if our value is professionalism, we are going to tuck our shirts in. And that was just one visual way of saying, are we in alignment with the idea of professionalism? And so I think those are two things. I think another thing is really getting to what people believe and trust. And I think that as a company, you've got to do it. You've got to know if you're if you are doing something, you've got to communicate that clearly, back to that why, because we're really trying to get people to believe, like really working on what people believe about the organization and about themselves. If I want somebody to take this new position and they don't want to take it, but I know that they're going to be great at it, I've got to really work on. I was talking to somebody when I was at another organization. I was like, I wanted this young lady to step into this leadership role, and she was pushing back. Oh, she was pushing back. So I'm having to focus on what are those limiting beliefs that she has, because I can see some things in her that she can't see in herself. And so as an organization, you're going to have these things that you've got to work on as an organization to strengthen the culture, and that a lot of that has to do with belief, and to balance that with accountability, right? So if you can't manage what you don't measure. And so nobody likes the word accountability because we think big brother, But here's the dirty little secret about accountability.
Right.
It's not because we don't care. When you don't care about somebody, you're apathetic. It's because you do care. You care about that person. You care about the success that you want them to have. And so that's why we hold each other accountable, so that we can achieve our goals. The problem is that if we don't balance that with trust and care, then it comes across as big brother. So I think that you're looking for identity and alignment, but you're also looking for saying, okay, are we caring about that person? Do they believe that we do? Because we really do. And if so, how are we holding each other accountable? How are we spurring each other on to achieve the goal? And I think that's really, from a culture standpoint, those are the foundations. And we talk a little bit about that in Lyft. One of our first kind of acronyms, we talk about, reminders as one of the three things that you can do. And we have a little acronym for that, PEAK. And the P in peak stands for purpose. And so we talk about reminding people constantly of the purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? Who are we, and how do we do it? Let's go, let's go, let's go. And I think that goes a long way. So I know that was a little bit long-winded answer, but man, you get me fired up on that. So that's good.
That's all right. In my dissertation, I redefined Cotter's strategic vision with defining your trophy. And I said, if you can think of it as an organization can tell me what your trophy is. So for example, I used the Pittsburgh Steelers. Every fan knew what the Pittsburgh Steelers goal was every single year. That was to win a Super Bowl. And everybody knew what the plan was. They knew what it was going to take to get there. They've done it before. They have an entire plan, a strategy to get there. At one time, it was defense. It was make the other team miserable, coming in the Three Rivers. it was 3 hours of pain. And you knew that's what the plan was, and have just enough offense to make sure that you could win. When I ask churches sometimes, what's your trophy? What's that thing that you as an organization say, this is what we're trying to achieve, and we've gotten there when we know when it is when we get there, and can you tell me what it is? Most times with churches and sometimes with organizations, they can't tell you what they're going for, what they're trying to win. So how can you possibly develop a strategy or even bullet points or milestones to get there if you have no idea what the trophy is? What's a win for you
so good,
as an organization?
because if you define that trophy, it allows you to set boundaries around your organization. Because if you don't, what I think that you're describing is an organization that can get extremely diluted in all these good things that may not have anything to do with what they're actually meant to do. And so, yes, this program over here is great. And I know there's some people that want to do that, but if you're focused on this one thing, this is your trophy, it helps you decide what is important and what's not. If you don't know your trophy, you can't prioritize one activity over the other because they both have equal value. I mean, they're both quote unquote good. So how do you say, no to this lady over here who wants to get as a church, if they want to get their seniors and they want to do this project versus over here and they want to go on a foreign mission trip? Are they both good? Yes, they are. So how do you say yes to one or not, but yes to both? Because if you don't have the resources to say yes to both, but you say yes, then you do both half good, right? You do both halfway, and then neither party's really happy. You don't really get any great results. Whereas if you said, no, this is who we are as an organization. this is where we're going to this is where we're going to focus our effort and our funds, then you're going to do really good at that thing, that trophy. So I love that idea, man. That's really good stuff.
Yeah, that'll be my next book. I just put that in the spirit. Now I got to go write the book.
Do it. Do it. I love it. That's good. It's good.
So you have something called Think,
Yeah,
Move,
so
and Thrive.
we
Tell us about
are,
that.
I like to think of us as engagement architects. And so Think, Move, Thrive came out of kind of the idea when I was working with the other company I was telling you about. We created a coaching system for them. We believe that the everyone in organizations, and what's funny is I created it for nonprofit, but we've had churches picked up too. It's been really strange, and so everyone in the organization should have the ability to be heard and the ability to make commitments, set their own personal trophies, and have someone hold them accountable to go get it. And usually, if you're a CEO, if you're the head pastor, if you're a vice president, you can have access to an executive coach in a lot of organizations. However, if you're just in the organization may not have the funds to be able to provide an executive coach to everybody in the organization. However, we think that everyone should have that opportunity and can benefit from coaching and development. So we created a coaching system that we include and help integrate into organizations so that they can use it as kind of like a system that they can fall back on, because a lot of people don't. You go to lunch and you go, okay, I want you to develop this person for 30 minutes and ask them great, insightful questions and get them to spill their beans about their life. And most people are going to be like, what? What? In the ministry, you do this naturally, but most people may not feel equipped to do that. So this is a system that they can ask 6 questions. 3 are always different. 3 are always the same once a month. And so that kind of spawned Think, Move, Thrive. So we help organizations kind of design what you talked about earlier, whether that is setting their trophy and understanding that better, understanding what their trophy is, if it's developing their people more, but ultimately with the goal of designing organizations and architecting organizations that have a high level of employee engagement.
I love that. I could talk to you all day about organization and leadership. You obviously also hit my sweet spot. So, but what are you excited about in this season of your life, Dallas?
It is a different season for me because I have 3 daughters, and I just had the second daughter is a teenager. So I have 2 of the 3 are teens, and I'm 1 year, 2 years away from the third daughter being a teenager. So I'm about to be the father of 3 teenage daughters. And so I don't know if that's exciting or terrifying. A little bit of both. I'll be honest with you. So being a parent of 3 teenage daughters is a season, but it's been really cool. And I think this goes back to leadership and that law of the harvest. My wife has done a great job, and with them as they've grown up, and I think that sometimes as parents of young kids, if you have a parent of young kids, you have so much work and effort that goes into being a good parent. If you're investing in it's thankless effort and you go, I just told them this yesterday, and they've lost their mind, they're doing it again, and you just kind of go through that and you think, well, is this ever going to be it? But I think now we're starting to see some of the fruit of that. See these individual personalities come out, and they're stepping into their their more adult self, and it's really interesting to see that, because we're kind of they're getting to be teenagers now, so we're kind of beginning the process of loosening it up, backing up, and letting them make some of their own mistakes. And it's been cool because you start to see some of the fruit of that parenting that you've worked really hard in. So I think that's one thing I'm excited to see where I feel like that God takes them and their walk and their faith and their journey, and can see that more now, their individual personalities kind of going their directions. That's been cool. I think from a business standpoint, I'm excited because I get to have these kinds of conversations with people just like you, and I want to have more of these conversations, and I would love to be able to share some of the reverse resumes, the experiences that I've had throughout my career, because it's definitely not a straight line from left to up, up and to the right. It's been zigzag, back, forward, around, back 3 steps, up 4, back 10, back up 10. I mean, just like, that journey to encourage other leaders, but also encourage them to not only try to grow a great organization, but do it the right way. And that is, invest in people as well and do the right thing. So I think that for me, that's exciting to be able to get out there and touch people with Lyft and be able to share that message of encouragement and also some tools that will help people maybe create. I want to help companies. The more companies I can help create cultures that people want to come and be a part of, that gets me jazzed and that gets me up in the morning. So being able to have that opportunity is very exciting.
I love that. I love to ask my guests this question.
Mm.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Boy, that's a heavy question. I think yeah, it's the last one. It's
That's
one of
why
the
it's the
last
last
ones.
one. One of
No,
the
I
last ones.
I think that's a great question. I think you have to begin with the end in mind, and I think that for me, um, I'm I want to pursue. I want to be known as. I think the legacy that I would like to have is being known as consistent and faithful in the work that I've been called to do and doing it well. So be excellent at what I've done. But I think also that includes relationships. I think one of the things that I would like to be known for is being someone who invested in others. That includes my own family, but it also includes people outside because we're kind of back to where we started from. People have invested in me. And I think that being someone that was known for investing in others, and whether that means going and taking people to lunch, or whether that means writing a book and getting that out to people, or having a podcast or being on a podcast. I think that is all wrapped up into it. If I can share what's worked and what hasn't worked, and I can listen and be a sounding board for other people, I think that would be a great legacy for me. Just leaving things better than I found it. You know.
I love it. As we wrap up our conversation, what key takeaways do you want our audience, to listeners, to take away from our
I would say
discussion today?
this. I would say number one, if you want to change the culture of your team, of your organization, or even your family, that consistency is an amazing tool that you have access to. We can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. And I think that what I'd love for your listeners to know is just because you don't see the fruit of things that you're doing today doesn't mean that you won't reap that reward later. If you just stay in the game, stay consistent, and continue to do what you know is the right thing, even when it's not the easy thing. And I think that would be my encouragement to your listeners, is that consistency wins the game.
Great. Where can people find the book
Yes.
Lyft
Oh
and
man.
learn more
Well,
about
that is
you?
great. So you can find Lyft on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere those books are sold. You can find Lyft, and you can also go to thinkmovethrive.com to see. You can find out there all our other things that we're into and what we offer. If you want to connect with me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the social. I am a very social person that is not social on social media, except for LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. So if you want to find me on Instagram, probably not a good idea. Twitter, Facebook, nope, 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 nope. Go to LinkedIn. You can find me. There's not that many Dallas Burnett's on LinkedIn. In fact, I think I'm one of maybe one or two. So you can find me there pretty quickly.
Well, you can give us the Let's Go Steelers before we hang up this call today, if you
You've
like.
been on me. See, your listeners don't know. Before the show, he's on me because he's a Steelers fan, and with a name like Dallas, you kind of are birthed to be a Cowboys fan. So I had to take some grief, which is true. I can't say anything about it. I mean, the Steelers has had our number, so it is what it is. But maybe we'll turn the corner. I'm gonna bring back. Maybe I can find one of Landry's like grandkids or something like that to come back and bring back some good coaching and the Cowboys or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. It's just a tough road.
See, what they can't see on my wall is a Super Bowl tickets I got for my Christmas from my
Oh
kids from the Super Bowl. So the
man.
Steelers won. So
Oh,
I have
that's
those on
so
my
good.
wall.
That's awesome. That's was it awesome? Was it an awesome experience? That's so good. That's so good. But I
Yeah, so
ticket
I got a ticket
ticket
from
from
each
each
one of the Super
one.
Bowls they
That's
won
so
on my
cool.
wall.
Each one, you got one from each one. I didn't realize that each one. Oh wow. Oh, that's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd have to go back pretty far to get some Cowboy Super Bowl tickets. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. It's been a dry spell for quite some time, but we'll see. But I'm glad. Listen, I'm glad the Steelers can they've done well,
That's okay.
and more power to them. And maybe the Cowboys will give you a run for your money sometime. So
There you go. Well, Dallas, thanks so much for being on the podcast and bringing us such amazing content. And
sure,
look forward to maybe have you back on again. This was a great conversation. We only barely scratched the surface of some really
I
cool
know it.
leadership and
Thank you,
organizational
Keith. I
change things. I'd
appreciate
love
it.
to have you on again.
Thanks for taking time with me today.